we have here are two generations of Jeep, a 1961 CJ5 and a 2016 Jeep Wrangler Rubicon. And in this video, we're going to find out how much has the Jeep changed, if at all.
If you want a second car and a vehicle for work around the house and one for hunting and fishing trips and one the youngsters could use for odd jobs, mister, you want a universal Jeep.
Whoever said a man's got to know his limitations never drove one of these. Jeep Wrangler.
Of course, a Jeep is an old school vehicle. It uses a lot of old school technology, and I think people often think that the newer Jeeps are virtually the same as the old Jeeps. Well, in this video, we're going to find out if that's true. Now, of course, they both have 7 slots on the front end, but there's a lot of visual differences. Now, when you think classic Jeep, you probably think of the 2-door utilitarian vehicle, but did you know that the 4-door vastly outsells the 2-door? Something like 70% of new Jeeps have 4 doors, and the 4-door Jeep was introduced in 2007. What's funny about that is when Jeep introduced the 4-door, people kind of lost their beans. They thought it wasn't a real Jeep, to the point where aftermarket manufacturers refused to build parts for 4-door Wranglers. It's also worth noting that this old Jeep was never called a Wrangler. The first Wrangler came out in 1987. This was a CJ, which stood for Civilian Jeep, which was introduced after the war and lasted all the way through 1986.
Hey folks, today's video is brought to you by SalvageReseller.com. This website allows you to bid live on online salvage auto auctions without a dealer's license. You can register for free or use the 20% off coupon in the description below. Go find your salvage car gem now.
Now, to get this thing into 4-wheel drive, you do have to go through a couple of steps. First of all, you've got 2 sticks on this transfer case. So this left stick engages 4-wheel drive, and then with this right stick, you choose whether or not you want high range, neutral, or low range. And then of course you gotta get out and lock the hubs. And this third lever down here, this is for engaging the PTO winch, which is a winch operated off of the engine power. That's really cool. All right. Driving the CJ5. Now this is a Jeep built under the Willis or Willys brand, which of course is now a model line in the Jeep Wrangler, but back in the day it was the parent company of Jeep. And on paper, these do have fairly similar suspension and chassis designs. They're both body on frame, which means there's a body bolted on top of a ladder frame, and they both have rigid solid axles. But this Jeep has leaf springs versus a new one which uses coils. And let me see if I can demonstrate that difference. So I'm going up our logs course here. Oh yeah, oh yeah. I think you can see the ride quality on this Jeep. It's not fantastic. That genuinely hurts. You can see the ride quality on this. So yes, this thing rides horribly, and it probably rode a little better when it was new, but not a lot better. Leaf springs just are very basic and reliable, but they don't give you a very good ride quality at all. All right, so to get this Jeep into 4-wheel drive, simply pull back on a lever, go into neutral, get into 4 low, easy as that. Nothing to get out and lock, no hubs to lock. And then we've got a 5-speed automatic transmission in this JK, which is the code of this Jeep, and off we go. Easy as that. So we're going to start out with our logs course and see how those coil springs perform compared to the leaf springs. Now, when Jeep went from leafs to coils in 1997, in the TJ generation, people lost their minds. They're like, this isn't a real Jeep. And now the TJ is, of course, the most beloved Jeep of all time, I think it's fair to say, at least of the Wrangler era. But let's try the logs course and see how the ride difference is with the coil springs versus the leafs. Say, get at a similar rate of speed here. Oh yeah, look at that. Granted, we are on larger tires. Ooh, stuck. These logs have gotten a little wet because of the rain. That's interesting. Let's take it with just a little bump. More speed than I had anticipated, but there you go. The suspension actually works now instead of fights you, but pretty noticeable difference in terms of ride quality going from the CJ into the JK. It's well, it's night and day, honestly. It's this is a ride I could drive and tolerate every day, where that CJ, not so much. One iconic Jeep characteristic which has remained are the hood latches. So you pull up on these little silver latches on this old Jeep, and that now allows you to pop open the hood, and we'll find out that's been pretty much the same for all these years. Another classic Jeep trait is you can lay the hood all the way back on the windshield to give you a little bit of extra room to work on these models. Now, the engines have changed quite a bit. When Jeep first launched back in the late 1940s, after the war, they had 4-cylinder engines only. It wasn't until later that they introduced the straight 6. Now, this is the F-head 4-cylinder. It makes somewhere around 70 to 75 horsepower. This newer Jeep also has the hood latches, and this isn't even the newest generation of Wrangler. There's been another one since this called the JL, which still has the hood latches, but per regulation, they did have to give it a little extra catch here so it doesn't go flying open on the highway. But you might notice, check this out, the windshield still folds all the way back for that extra access. Now, Jeep was known for their 4-cylinder and 6-cylinder, and then for a time in the 80s, their V8s. However, by the time the JK came along, there was only one engine option, which was a V6. This one has a 3.6-liter V6. It makes about 285 horsepower, which is a lot more than 70-ish in that old CJ5. And nowadays, of course, you have an electrified model, you've got a 4-cylinder model, and you also have the mighty V8. So Jeep has really expanded their engine options. And if you check this out, the hood still folds all the way back to rest up against the windshield. Now, the CJ5 does have a foldable windshield, a trait they still continue to the newer Jeeps, but on these old Jeeps, it was as simple as pulling a lever on the inside, pulling off your bikini top, and then resting the windshield on the hood. And that's what these little hooks are for, if you've ever wondered what those are, at the front of an old Jeep. And you can see that would latch up here at the top of the windshield, which is pretty cool. Of course, doors come off super easy. Now, here's a fun bit of Jeep history trivia I bet you guys didn't know. The 60s, the 70s, and the 80s, there were two different CJ models, the 5 and the 7. How do you tell a 5 from a 7? Well, you look at the door cutout. On the 5, you've got this kind of streamlined little wisp. On the 7, it was a perfect U. Now, the windshield still folds down on this JK, but it's a huge chore. You got to remove all these trim pieces, and there's something like 24 bolts to pull this down. And from people I've talked to that have done it, it takes about an hour and a half to 2 hours. So it's quite a long process. And then the doors also come off as well. And this is actually pretty similar to the old Jeep. You simply undo a couple little bolts here, and they pull off their hinges. And then you've got this little check strap, which just simply comes off. So the doors, super easy to take off. The windshield, super difficult to fold down. The new Jeep is just a little bit easier. All right, steering is actually surprisingly light considering it's non-power assisted, but it really works pretty well. And now we're going through our trenches course, and in this course we're gonna get various wheels in the air if we don't have enough articulation. These are grooves cut into the ground, and that's the other thing about these leaf springs is not a lot of articulation. These Jeeps are also pretty tippy. And the other thing which is interesting too is no LSDs in this particular Jeep, so we'll take it nice and slow. Oh yeah, it's rocking. So you can see the challenge with the open drifts is if you get opposite ends in the air, you kind of end up losing your momentum like that. You gotta ride the brake, try to get it unstuck. Come on, Jeep. Come on, you got this, buddy. Okay, you don't got this. Let me give it a bump. And all this means is that these Jeeps, you really gotta off-road with a little bit of speed and not necessarily a lot of precision. Having said that, they are very durable and they are very easy to fix. So if you do end up breaking down, they are going to be pretty easy to get back on the road. Also, four-wheel drum brakes, which means slowing down, can be a little bit of a chore. Off we go into the trenches course. Let's see how this vehicle works and see how the solid axles articulate in comparison. Now, people like to complain about these Pentastar V6s because it did follow the 4-liter, which is one of the most iconic engines of all time, the inline 6. People were like, that V6, that's a minivan engine. And, you know, to some extent that's true, but these Pentastars, especially these later ones, I think have proven themselves to be excellent engines and very not only reliable but versatile in what they can do. I mean, this is a Jeep you can easily tackle the Rubicon Trail in and yet cruise up the interstate at 75 miles an hour, which is pretty impressive. So instantly, as we start crawling through the holes, or the trenches course here, excuse me, you can feel the axles are now, you know, articulating to the ground instead of fighting the ground. And even with the differentials unlocked, you can see how much easier it is to just crawl up this course instead of having to take it at big speed. And if we do start to lose traction, we have not only traction control but true locking discs, which we can engage to keep all four wheels spinning at the same speed, unlike the open disc in that CJ5. But let's try the rocks course and see how that looks. One aspect of the CJ5, which was a carryover from the old World War II Jeep, is the location of the fuel tank underneath the driver's seat. That's right, you are sitting on top of the gasoline, and you can see it's just a little tiny filler neck. You fill it up here on the left side of the vehicle. Now imagine in World War II being shot at by Nazis and having to worry about your gas tank exploding. Well, actually, if you're in an open top Jeep, that's probably the least of your concerns. The new one's gotten a little bit more advanced. The new Jeep still has this kind of cool exposed filler just like the old one, but now it's of course located on the rear quarter panel, and the fuel tank is tucked safely in between the frame rails, so if you get in a collision from the back or the side, you're not gonna, well, end up in gas, which is not ideal. Now to get in the trunk of the CJ, you have to pull up and out on this spare tire carrier, which apparently I'm not man enough to do. There we go. That swings out, and then these actually had a tailgate, which then folds down, and there's a couple little chains that connect it to the body so you can drive around with your tailgate down, and that's got to be one of, oh, tailgate's falling off. They also come off quite easily, but that's got to be one of the smallest trunks in the history of the automobile. The JK has a standard swing out gate, and you got tons and tons and tons of space for gear and passengers and all that in the back. So certainly storage capacity has gone up quite a bit in the new Jeep. The inside of the CJ is beautifully simple, and there's a couple of cool features in here which were iconic to these Jeeps, like the center mounted speedometer. And what I think is cool about this, you go from 0 to 9, and each one of those numbers is 10 miles an hour. 90 miles an hour in this would be absolutely terrifying and not really possible, excuse me. All the other switches are very simple. You've got a couple switches for your lights, for your wipers. You've got a hand throttle, which manually sets the throttle at a set RPM. So if you're out farming, or if you want, you know, dead man's cruise control, you can do that, and it leaves the throttle at a higher position. And then down here, you've got your very simple climate control. You can change the temperature, where it goes, and of course your defrost. You've got a very basic fan control. So really simple interior. Now the dash in the new Jeep is plastic, and of course people will say that's a shame, but it also has airbags, 4 of them, which will really help you in an accident. It's also got power windows, air conditioning, heated seats, power mirrors. You've got power to, you know, charge up your phone, that kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, it's not as iconic or interesting in here, but it certainly is a lot more comfortable. Let's give rocks a go here. See how it does on some small boulders. We are aired down today. Okay, there we go. Try to crawl it out of here. Come on, Jeep. Let's see what you got. Okay. That was actually pretty good, all things considered. Nice job, little Jeep. Thanks for putting up with that challenge. Let's go see what the new one's like. Oh my god, I almost just fell out. This gets pretty tricky when this course gets wet. We do have 35-inch tall tires on this Wrangler JK. We're definitely putting them through the paces today. It's slippery rocks now behind this stuff. Come on, Jeep. Nice work, Jeep. Alright, so they both completed the course. One difference is, obviously, the JK made it look like cake, whereas the CJ had to work it. Some people might think, well, that means that the JK is more fun. In my opinion, it's actually more fun to have to work it a little bit than, you know, simply just drive up anything. I actually like the challenge that the CJ5 provides. Well, that was a ton of fun, guys. I mean, for those folks that think the Jeep hasn't changed that much, it certainly has. I mean, the basic body on frame solid axle thing, yeah, I mean, that on paper is the same, but the whole experience has progressed a lot. Both on-road and off-road capability is vastly different. But for, you know, that classic experience, that CJ gives you more fun for dollar than just any other vehicle. Guys, let me know what you think in the comment section below. Big thank you to Case and Brendan behind the camera today. We'll see you on the next video.